The morning mist sat heavily over the valley of Oakhaven. For most people, Oakhaven was a boring place where nothing ever happened. The villagers spent their days farming or trading wool in the local market. But for Clara, a 19-year-old girl with a passion for history, the valley held many secrets. Clara worked in the basement of the village library. It was a dark, cramped space filled with the smell of old parchment and damp stone. Her job was to organize the forgotten records, documents so old that nobody remembered why they were kept. One Tuesday afternoon, while moving a heavy crate of tax records from the 1600s, she found something unusual. Tucked between two thick ledgers was a tube made of dark, polished leather. When Clara opened it, a piece of thick, golden paper slid out. It wasn't paper, she realized as she touched it. It was vellum, made from animal skin. It was a map, but it didn't show the valley or the nearby kingdom. At the top, in elegant swirling letters, were the words, "The Invisible City of Æthelgard." Clara's heart began to race. Æthelgard was a legend. According to the stories her grandfather told her, it was a city built entirely of white marble and silver, hidden by a magical veil of clouds. It was said that the people of Æthelgard had discovered a way to live for hundreds of years by using the energy of the earth. Most historians thought it was a myth, a fairy tale for children, but the map in Clara's hands looked very real. "What are you looking at, Clara?" asked a voice. Clara jumped, nearly dropping the map. Standing in the doorway was Julian, her best friend and the village blacksmith's apprentice. Julian was tall, strong, and much more practical than Clara. He didn't believe in myths or magic, but he was always loyal to her. "Look at this, Julian," Clara whispered, beckoning him over. "I think I found it, the way to Æthelgard." Julian squinted at the map. "Æthelgard? Clara, that's just a story. Look at these landmarks, the River of Stars, the Whispering Peak. These places don't exist on any modern chart. It's probably a map for a board game or a fantasy novel." "No," Clara insisted, pointing to a small symbol at the bottom of the map, a compass with an eye in the center. "This is the seal of the Royal Explorers. This map was made by someone who actually went there. Look at the coordinates. It's located in the Forbidden Range, the mountains to the north that no one is allowed to enter." Julian sighed, but Clara saw a spark of curiosity in his eyes. "The Forbidden Range is dangerous. There are wolves, steep cliffs, and the weather changes in seconds. If we go there, we might not come back." "If we stay here," Clara countered, "we will spend our whole lives in this basement and the forge. Don't you want to see if the legends are true? Don't you want to find out if there is more to the world than just Oakhaven?" Julian looked at the golden vellum, then back at Clara's determined face. He knew he couldn't let her go alone. "Fine," he said, throwing his hands up in surrender. "We leave at dawn, but if we run into a mountain lion, I'm the one who gets to say, 'I told you so.'" Clara smiled and carefully rolled the map back into its leather tube. She didn't know it yet, but this map was more than just a guide to a city. It was a key to a power that would change their lives forever. That night, Clara packed her bag with dried meat, a sturdy rope, a sharp knife, and a compass. She didn't sleep at all. She watched the moon move across the sky, thinking about the silver streets of Æthelgard. She felt a strange pull, as if the city itself was calling her name. The sun had not yet risen when Clara and Julian met at the edge of the village. The air was freezing, and a thick frost covered the ground, making every step crunch loudly. They moved quickly, avoiding the main roads. They didn't want the village elders to see them. The Forbidden Range was strictly off limits, and anyone caught heading toward the peaks would be brought back and punished. By midday, the rolling green hills of the valley had been replaced by sharp gray rocks and ancient pine trees. The forest here was dense, and the branches were so thick that they blocked out most of the sunlight. "The map says we need to find the Stone Sentinel," said Clara, wiping sweat from her forehead despite the cold. She pulled the leather tube from her pack and unrolled the vellum.
It should be a rock formation that looks like a soldier guarding a pass. Julian looked around, his hand resting on the hilt of a heavy hunting knife he had forged himself. "I don't see any soldiers, Clara. Just a lot of trees and shadow. Are you sure we haven't missed a turn?" Suddenly, the wind picked up. It didn't just howl, it whistled through the narrow mountain passes in a way that sounded almost like human speech. This was the Whispering Peak mentioned in the legends. The sounds were confusing, making it difficult to tell which direction was north or south. "Do you hear that?" Julian asked, his voice low. "It sounds like someone calling my name." "It's an acoustic trick, Julian," replied Clara, though she felt a shiver down her spine. "It's the shape of the rocks catches the wind and vibrates. Don't listen to it. Focus on the map." They climbed higher, the incline becoming so steep that they had to use their hands to pull themselves up. After another hour of climbing, they reached a plateau. Standing at the far end was a massive 50-foot-tall rock. It was shaped perfectly like a man in a helmet leaning against the mountain wall. "The Stone Sentinel," whispered Clara in awe. As they approached the rock, they noticed a series of carvings near the base. It was a language Clara didn't recognize from her books in the library. It looked like a mix of geometry and art, triangles and circles connected by thin, straight lines. "Julian, look at the eyes of the statue," noted Clara. The sentinel had 2 deep holes where its eyes should be. Clara realized that the sun, which was now setting in the west, was perfectly aligned with the rock. As the sun dipped lower, a single beam of golden light passed through the sentinel's eyes and hit a specific spot on the cliff face opposite them. "That's the door," Clara realized. "The river of stars isn't a river of water. It's a river of light." They rushed to the spot where the light hit the cliff. At first, it looked like solid stone, but when Clara touched the surface, it felt warm, almost vibrating. She followed the lines of the geometric carvings with her fingers. As she touched the center of a carved sun, a deep, rhythmic thrumming sound echoed through the mountain. The cliff didn't open like a door. It began to dissolve. The solid rock turned into a shimmering, transparent curtain of silver energy. Beyond the curtain, the air was warm and smelled of blooming jasmine and ozone. "Julian," Clara breathed, her eyes wide. "We aren't in Oakhaven anymore." Julian reached out a hand, hesitating. "If we step through that, there might not be no coming back. The map didn't say how to close the door from the other side." Clara took his hand, her grip firm. "We didn't come this far to turn back because of a maybe. Together?" Julian took a deep breath and nodded. "Together." They stepped through the silver veil. For a moment, it felt like they were falling through a sea of stars. Their skin tingled with electricity, and the sounds of the mountain wind vanished, replaced by a deep, melodic humming. When they opened their eyes, they were standing on a balcony made of pure white marble, looking down at a city that defied every law of architecture they knew.
The view from the balcony was breathtaking. Ethelgard did not look like the old stone villages of the valley. It was a city of light. Spire-like buildings made of iridescent white marble reached toward a sky that remained a soft, permanent twilight. Bridges made of solid light arched between towers, and gravity seemed to be a mere suggestion rather than a rule. "It's real," Julian whispered, his voice shaking. "Everything your grandfather said, it was all true." They descended a grand staircase that led into the heart of the city. As they walked, they noticed that the streets weren't paved with stones, but with a translucent material that pulsed with a soft blue glow. Clara knelt down and pressed her palm against the ground. "It's warm," she noted. "Julian, the city isn't just built on the mountain, it's powered by it. I think these are conduits for geothermal or magical energy." As they moved deeper into the central plaza, they noticed a strange lack of people. The markets were filled with exotic fruits that never decayed, and fountains flowed with water that defied physics, spiraling upward into delicate shapes, yet there was no one there to enjoy them. The silence was heavy, broken only by a low, constant hum that vibrated in their bones. "Where is everyone?" Julian asked, his hand returning to his knife. "A city this size should have thousands of people. It looks like they just disappeared." They reached a massive circular structure at the city's center, the Grand Zenith. Above the building, a giant crystal floated in the air, spinning slowly. It acted like a prism, catching the twilight and scattering it into 1,000 different colors. Clara checked her map. The symbol of the eye and the compass was carved on the doors of the Zenith. "The map says the heart of the city is inside," Clara said. "If the city is losing its veil, the problem must be in there." They pushed the heavy doors open. Inside, the architecture was even more complex. The room was a massive sphere, and in the center sat a complex machine that looked like a mix between a telescope and a clock. Hundreds of brass rings spun around a glowing core of pure energy. "Look at the core," Julian pointed out. The glowing center was flickering. Every time it dimmed, the blue lines in the streets outside faded. A dark crystalline growth, looking like black glass, was spreading across the machinery, slowing down the rotation of the rings. "It's a resonance chamber," Clara realized, her library training kicking in. "This machine maintains the frequency that keeps the city hidden and the air warm. That black growth is absorbing the energy. It's like a parasite." Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. A figure stepped into the light. It was a man, but his skin had a metallic sheen, and his eyes were like polished silver. He wore a long robe that seemed to be woven from fiber-optic threads. "You are late," the man said. His voice didn't come from his mouth. It echoed directly in their minds. "The resonance is failing. The silence has already consumed the lower wards." "Who are you?" Julian demanded, stepping in front of Clara. "I am the Chronicler, the last of the Ethelgardians. My people didn't disappear. They became part of the city's consciousness to keep the machine running. But the parasite, the shadow glass, is too strong. It feeds on the very stories and memories that power Ethelgard." Clara stepped forward, holding out her map. "We found this in Oakhaven. It led us here. There must be a way to stop it." The chronicler looked at the map. "That vellum is a manual for the core, but to clear the shadow glass, someone must enter the resonance chamber and manually recalibrate the frequency. It requires a mind that is still anchored to the physical world, a mind full of new stories." "I'll do it," Clara said immediately. "Julian, no!" Julian protested. "He said the others became part of the city. What if you can't come back?" Clara looked at the flickering core, then at the beautiful dying city. "If this machine stops, the mountain will collapse, and the valley, our home, will be destroyed by the energy release. I have to try." The chronicler raised a silver hand toward the machine. The rings slowed down just enough to reveal a small opening. "You must hold the core and think of home, not as it is, but as it could be. You must provide the frequency of hope."
The heat radiating from the Grand Zenith was intense. The air shimmered with static electricity, making Clara's hair stand on end. She stepped toward the center of the sphere, where the brass rings hummed with a dangerous, erratic vibration. The black shadow glass looked like jagged obsidian, clenching the machinery like the claws of a beast. "Clara, wait!" Julian called out, his voice barely audible over the roar of the machine. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small, heavy iron cube, a cooling block he had forged in the village. If the temperature gets too high, throw this near the primary gears. It might give you a few extra seconds." Clara took the cube, her fingers trembling. She looked at the chronicler. "What do I do once I'm inside?" "The core is a mirror," the chronicler explained, his silver eyes glowing. "It reflects the consciousness of those near it. The shadow glass grew because our people became too focused on the past. We stopped creating. We only remembered. You must provide a vision of the future. You must dream." Clara climbed onto the narrow maintenance platform. As she approached the core, the black glass began to hiss. It sensed a living presence. Sharp shards of shadow shot toward her, but Clara ducked, sliding into the very center of the rotating rings. She reached out and grabbed the central crystal. It wasn't solid. It felt like holding a whirlwind. Immediately, her mind was flooded with images. She saw the gray library in Oakhaven, the tired faces of the farmers, and the dusty records she had spent years organizing. The shadow glass began to grow faster, feeding on the boredom and sadness of those memories. "No," Clara thought, closing her eyes. "That is not all we are." She began to think of the green hills of the valley in spring. She imagined the library not as a dark basement, but as a bright hall where children learned about the stars. She pictured Julian opening a school for engineers, teaching them how to combine the village's metalwork with the city's light. She imagined a world where Oakhaven and Ethelgard were connected, where the magic of the mountain helped the people of the earth. The core reacted. The blue light turned into a brilliant golden white. The frequency changed from a low hum to a triumphant song. The shadow glass couldn't survive the change in vibration. It began to crack and shatter, falling away from the brass rings like burnt paper. The rings began to spin with perfect, silent precision. The heavy, oppressive silence of the city was replaced by a light, airy energy. Suddenly, a massive surge of power threw Clara back. Julian caught her just as the rings reached full speed. The chronicler stood tall, his form becoming more transparent as the city's light intensified. "The resonance is restored," the chronicler said, and for the first time he looked at them with a real smile. "You have given us a new song to sing. But the veil is now open. Ethelgard is no longer hidden." As they stepped back outside onto the balcony, the clouds around the mountain were gone. For the first time in 1,000 years, the sun shone directly onto the white marble towers. Far below, they could see the tiny houses of Oakhaven. "They'll see us now," Julian said, looking at the horizon. "The elders, the farmers, everyone." "Good," Clara replied, leaning against him. She still had the golden map in her hand, but she didn't need it anymore. "Let them come. We have a lot of work to do." The city didn't disappear, and neither did Clara. She had found the greatest treasure of all, a bridge between the legends of the past and the possibilities of the future. The invisible city was finally home.
The transformation of the Forbidden Range did not go unnoticed. In Oakhaven, the villagers dropped their tools and stared in disbelief as the permanent storm clouds above the northern peaks evaporated. In their place stood a shimmering crown of white and silver that looked like a fallen star resting on the mountain. "They're coming," Julian noted, watching the thin line of torchlight winding up the mountain path from the valley. The mayor, the elders, and half the village, they looked more terrified than curious. Clara stood at the edge of the marble plaza, her eyes fixed on the grand zenith. The city was alive. The fountains were no longer just water, they were liquid light, and the buildings seemed to pulse in time with the heartbeat of the mountain. "We have to show them that this isn't a threat," Clara said. "If they come here with fear, they might trigger the city's defense systems." The chronicler appeared beside them, his metallic skin reflecting the rising sun. "The city reacts to the emotional frequency of its guests. If their hearts are closed, the gates will remain shut. You must be the ambassadors."
As the first group of villagers reached the Silver Vale, Clara stepped forward. Her mother and the village mayor were at the front, clutching pitchforks and old lanterns. They stopped at the edge of the shimmering energy field, frozen by the sight of the impossible architecture. "Stay back, Clara," the mayor shouted, his voice trembling. "It's witchcraft. That city is a trap." "It's not a trap, Mr. Mayor," Clara said firmly, reaching out to touch the silver curtain. "It's an invitation. This city was built by people who wanted to understand the world, just like we do. They didn't use magic. They used the energy of the earth, the same earth we farm every day." She turned to the chronicler. "Show them." The chronicler raised his hand, and a large holographic display appeared above the villagers. It showed the internal mechanics of the mountain, the geothermal vents, the pressure valves, and the way the city cooled the magma to prevent volcanic eruptions. The villagers watched in silence. They saw that the city wasn't a monster. It was a giant machine that had been protecting the valley for centuries by stabilizing the mountain's heat. Without Ethelgard, the valley of Oakhaven would have been destroyed by earthquakes long ago. The mayor lowered his pitchfork. "You mean this place has been keeping us safe?" "Yes," Julian added, stepping forward. "And with the technology here, we can bring light to every house in the valley. We can heal the sick and grow crops even in the coldest winter, but we have to work together." One by one, the villagers crossed the Silver Vale. As they entered, the city's lights turned from a defensive red to a welcoming amber. The fear began to melt away, replaced by the same wonder Clara had felt when she first found the map. The chronicler handed Clara a small glowing crystal, a fragment of the central core. "The Library of Ethelgard is now yours to manage, Clara. The stories of the past and the technology of the future are in your hands." Clara looked at the crystal, then at Julian, and finally at the crowd of people exploring the marble streets. Her life in the dark basement of the library was over. A new chapter had begun, not just for her, but for the whole world. The invisible city was finally seen, and the stories were finally shared.